Let's start with a word of prayer. Let's bow our heads. Dear Father in heaven, we're thankful that we can gather here this afternoon and think about health, think about diabetes. Lord, we pray that you'll guide our minds, give us wisdom, help us to understand the concepts, and may we be blessed so we can bless others. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. The title of my talk is Diabetes, the Butter with the Sweet. You might be thinking, that must be supposed to be bitter, right? Bitter with the sweet. But no, it's the butter with the sweet. And I hope by the time we get to the end of this, you understand why I chose that title. 1954, the United States tested the largest atom bomb they would ever test in the history of bomb testing. This atom bomb, was 1,000 times larger than the bomb they dropped on Hiroshima. 1,000 times larger. Scientists around the world warned against trying such a crazy idea, but undaunted, they decided to blow this thing off. It sent a cloud of fire 100,000 feet into the air. It's made so much heat that big winds, hurricane-type winds, started blowing across the ocean. This was done in the South Pacific in the Marshall Islands, which was a U.S. territory. And the winds blew roofs off of houses, palm tree branches off of palm trees. I mean, it created quite a stir in the islands. And so the islands were all upset and decided to sue the U.S. government. And the government said, okay, we're sorry, here's some cash. Well, what do you do with cash out in the middle of nowhere in the South Pacific on an island? Well, it's a little hard to know what to do with cash out there until the government solved that problem too by importing junk food. All kinds of crinkly bags. And pretty soon the people had a bigger bomb on their hand than the atom bomb. They had the junk food bomb. And so, well, what did they eat before? Well, fruits and vegetables and fish. After this, frozen turkey tails, Spam, convenience foods, high in fat, salt, and sugar, and very low in nutrition. And it changed the diet of an entire culture, a culture who had never heard of diabetes before. But after this change of diet, they had 30% of the people over the age of 15, 50% over the age of 50 who had diabetes. And with it, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, kidney and eye disease, amputations. I had a friend who wanted to be a student missionary over to the Marshall Islands. And they were a physical therapy student. Then they figured out that they would need a lot more wound care training because that's all physical therapists did over there, taking care of amputees. And they decided they weren't quite prepared for that. Well, anyway, this is sort of a model that I want to keep in mind because a lot of people will say, well, diabetes is inherited. From who? If you're the Marshallese. Well, you inherit it from the Americans. Well, you can't do that, so we're going to talk about natural, safe blood pressure control. I used to do things fairly conventional. This is where I was practicing up in Iowa with one of my patients. Now I do lifestyle medicine, which is find out why people are sick by what they did. That's right, we do it to ourselves. And then change that. It's a little more challenging for the patient than taking a different pill, but the results are really better because pills didn't cause the disease in the first place. It was lifestyle. So we're going to talk about lifestyle improvements that will help people avoid or reverse diabetes. And our outline is we'll talk about obesity and fats, we'll talk about sugar and fiber, we'll talk about exercise and water. Now, diabetes is really a bigger pandemic than is COVID, if you please. it's going to break the medical system for sure. And here's the United States statistics, and the numbers keep going up. But if you looked at India, the curve is even sharper as they adopt the Western lifestyle, as they eat the foods from other countries. So again, they say diabetes is inherited. Well, grandma had it and mom had it, so daughter will have it, or son, or whatever. But really, what happens is we adopt our parents' lifestyle. Habits. Diet, yeah. And so we eat like they ate, so we die like they died. And so this is a problem. Now, history. How far back does the history of diabetes go? Well, they found all the signs and symptoms listed for diabetes on the walls of the pyramids, dating back to 1552 BC. Now, who do you suppose built that pyramid? Maybe a few Israelites, eh? 1552 BC. And so Israelites would have been in Egypt during a time that there was diabetes there. And they would have been building some of those structures. Very interesting that when God released the Israelites, gave them their emancipation, the Exodus took place, that he said, if you will diligently hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, do that which is right, keep all his statutes and all his commandments. He says, I'll put none of these diseases upon thee, which I brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee. And the Egyptians had diabetes. So apparently, he had told them something prior to that if they would follow it, they could totally avoid diabetes. So we'll get back to that. Keep that in mind. But first of all, what is diabetes? Well, diabetes is too much sugar. Too much sugar in the blood, too much sugar in the urine. You ever met somebody that was just a little too sweet? Well, that's these folks, just a little too sweet. And what is too sweet? It's based on a fasting blood sugar. Normal should be 70 to 99. You can go a little lower than that without too much trouble. People in Brazil do, especially if they haven't been on processed food. But you don't want to go over that on a fasting. That means when you get up in the morning, you check your blood sugar. If you go over that, we say you have pre-diabetes. Now, you've heard of preschool. Most people that go to preschool go on to regular school. And most people with pre-diabetes go on to regular diabetes, which is 126 or above. So those are the numbers for fasting blood sugars. We also use something called hemoglobin A1C, but this is the main screening test here. Now, why you don't want diabetes? What's the matter with a little extra sugar? Well, here's the problem. Your body doesn't like a little extra sugar. It coats everything with sugar. It coats the proteins with sugar. It coats the blood vessels with sugar. It coats the blood cells with sugar. And it causes a decrease in oxygenation to the tissues, especially down at your feet, which you need. But diabetics lose their feet because of no oxygen down there. Amputations. And when they get amputations, they don't heal well. That's what we said about those Marshallese, right? When they don't heal well, this gentleman here, you can definitely tell he's missing something there, but that one's artificial too. So that's a lot of trouble to try to walk with two artificial limbs. We were out in, Baltimore, Maryland. We were doing a series of health meetings. A lady came walking out of the next door house with a big medical boot. We said, why the medical boot? She says, I've got a diabetic foot ulcer. I can see my tendons through the bottom of my foot. The doctor wants to amputate the front of my foot toward the end of the week. And we said, well, you want some help with that? She said, sure. So we started to work. We said, well, let's see. Let's find something around your house. Do you have any 5-gallon buckets? No. Do you have a big stock pot? Yes. And what else do you have? We found an igloo, a container for carrying food in. And we said, okay, let's put hot water in the stock pot, cold water in the igloo. We're going to start doing hot and cold treatments. We started having her put her foot in the hot water for 3 minutes. Cold water for 1, hot water for 3, cold water for 1, back and forth. We did hot and cold treatments. Then we put a big charcoal poultice, mixture of charcoal and flaxseed, up in this wound, wrapped it up and sent her to bed. Next morning, more hot and cold treatments. Next night, more hot and cold treatments. And that night, instead of a charcoal poultice, we put in a fresh fig poultice. We took fig material. There happened to be a fig tree right behind the garage where we were staying. I took 2 or 3 figs and cleaned out all the stuff and put it into just one fig and then packed it into the bottom of her foot. Figs are good because, well, you remember Hezekiah and his fig poultice? Figs clean up wounds. They literally eat junk. You know, the way they are pollinated is a wasp flies into them and he never comes out because he gets eaten. The fig melts him down. It melts down stuff, so it cleans wounds up really good. So we put that on the next night, and then by the time she went back to her doctor on Friday, this had been a week, he looked at the wound and said, "Oh, it's looking so good. You must be doing something right." He put off surgery to see how it would do. So she saved herself an amputation. People making good choices enjoy better health. And they're with their family and friends. They save their toes. What does it take to save your toes? That's what we want to do, is save the toe. That's the plan. When I was at Loma Linda, one of my professors was a foot doctor. He had become famous for moving the average diabetic amputation from above the knee to below the knee. One of the things, though, he did, he ran a whole ward of patients, of diabetics out on, well, in LA. And he decided one day, you know, we're always amputating toes on diabetics. Let's just do it prophylactically. Let's just do it as prevention. He took all his diabetics and took off all their toes. That's interesting. He says, you don't need your toes. But at least he saved them having to get taken off after they had an ulcer, because once they have an ulcer, then they're infected. But anyway, that's not recommended. People like to keep their toes. This little piggy went to market. Did your parents play that with you when you were a kid? That was one of my mom's favorites. This little piggy. All right. Heart disease and stroke kill a lot of diabetics, and they get high blood pressure. They end up with blindness. This is like macular degeneration, retinopathy, #1 cause of blindness. And it's hard to recuperate your eyes once they get the troubles with blindness from diabetes. They get peripheral neuropathy, pain or numbness. Sometimes this precedes the blood sugar problems by several years. Somebody might be complaining of peripheral neuropathy 2 years before they come down with high blood sugars. It's an ominous sign, and anyway, it causes pain and numbness, and I've had patients with so much numbness they couldn't feel their feet. They broke their feet, and they didn't know it. They just kept walking. They broke all the bones in their feet. Oh, those are hard to fix. That shortens their life by 12 to 14 years. And it makes them more likely to end up in the nursing home in middle age. It affects mood, memory, personality, risk of depression. Had one family that the husband was really getting tired of the wife. She was hard to get along with. He decided it was time to divorce her. And he's the head elder. Not supposed to do those kind of things. Anyway, he decided to divorce her. And then we checked his blood sugars. They were going up. We got his blood sugars under control naturally. For him, it was basically avoiding oils especially, as well as refined carbohydrates. And then he decided after a while his wife wasn't so bad after all. He'd keep her, and he did. All because his personality was affected by the high blood sugars. Now, let's look at fixing it, okay? Let's look at the fixes. And here's a study of pre-diabetics, because most of them go on to diabetes, so they make a good study group. And so these pre-diabetics were put in 3 groups. One's called the placebo group, meaning they didn't do anything. They just lived their lives as they were living them. And most of them came down with diabetes, as represented by this red graft. The second group they gave doctor pills to, metformin, glyburide, that kind of thing. And they saw a 31% reduction in the incidence of diabetes. That means out of 100 people, 31 fewer came down with diabetes. That's pretty good for the 31, but how about the rest of them? The third group got lifestyle changes. They didn't give them pills, they just changed what they did. Those saw a 58% reduction in the incidence of diabetes. You know what that tells me? Lifestyle interventions are a much more powerful medical intervention than pills. Yeah, and what were the lifestyle changes? Well, they had them losing weight. They had them exercising every day. They had them eating more fiber, less fat, and less refined carbohydrates. And that's the way they were able to get these people figured out. So if you had 3 different medical interventions, one didn't do much for you, one gave you a 30% improvement, and the next one gave you a 60% improvement, or 58%, what do you want for your family or friends? What do you want for yourself? You want the best medical intervention possible. And so that's why we want to use lifestyle changes. But aren't the pills and the drugs good too, aren't they? Well, New England Journal of Medicine did this study. They wanted to see what would happen if they got really aggressive about blood sugar control. More times of testing, more giving of shots or pills. 4-year study. Yes, they controlled the blood sugars better. Yes, they kept them very tightly within range. But guess what? 20% more of the patients died. Those pills are poisonous. Insulin is not there just for sugar. It's also a growth hormone, makes cancer grow. It makes your cholesterol go up. It gives you heart disease. It's not great to be getting extra insulin. And what about other drugs? It's interesting that if your cholesterol goes up, they'll give you a statin drug. That'll give you diabetes. 70% higher risk. And then you're going to be taking metformin, and that will wipe out your B12. Then you get Alzheimer's. Oh, does anybody here remember what Alzheimer's was? Oh, yeah. It's that disease where you forget. Okay. Well, here's the bottom line. Healthy people don't need drugs, huh? Most people like being healthy. So what does it take to be healthy? That's the question, and that's what we want to answer. Now, here's 2 men. And which one do you think has the higher risk of diabetes? Oh, yes, the one on the right. For argument's sake, let's say his waistline is 32 and his is 42, just 10 inches difference. For 10-inch difference in waistline, he's got a 60% higher risk of diabetes. 60%. And obesity is the big risk factor for diabetes. If you're underweight, then your lifetime risk of diabetes is only 8%. But if you're obese, then your lifetime risk is 57%, meaning that over half of obese people come down with diabetes in their lifetime. Now, why is this? Why is obesity such a risk factor? Let's look at this on a physiology slide. This is my slide here. This is a capillary. A capillary is a blood vessel so small that only one red blood cell at a time can go through it. Pictured here is these things. And in the body, all your cells sit on a capillary somewhere. And so this is a normal cell. When a normal cell gets hungry, it will start putting receptors for insulin down in the bloodstream. A receptor for insulin is sort of like a doorknob. And the insulin then is like a doorkeeper. The doorkeeper comes and opens the door, and the sugar moves into the cell. That's the way it works. And so notice that only one doorknob's down here where it can get opened. The rest are still inside because he's not that hungry. He's just, a little bit hungry, so he put out one receptor. Then you have a cell that's totally overfed, overweight. All the receptors got pulled inside. When the receptors got pulled inside, the insulin had no doorknobs to open, so it accumulated in the bloodstream. High insulin isn't good for you. And the blood sugar accumulates in the bloodstream, and that gives you the complications we just talked about. And so this is a bad situation. Now, what is it that filled that cell up? Yes, this is a fat cell, and there's two things that'll fill it up. The one thing is called calories. But how many calories in 1 gram of sugar? 4. 4 calories in 1 gram of sugar. How many calories in 1 gram of fat? 9. Which is going to fill the cell up faster? They'll both do it, but the fat will fill it up twice as fast. So a lot of times it's the fat in the diet that's making the diabetic insulin resistant, but it's the sugar causing the complications out here in the bloodstream. And so then the diabetic, they come to Dr. Clark's lecture. They decide they better get moving, they better get exercising, they better get active. When they get active and they get moving and they start exercising, then the cells get hungry again. When the cell gets hungry, it starts putting lots of receptors down in the bloodstream. A lot of receptors then will get bound to by insulin. The doors will get opened and the sugar moves into the cell. What did I say made the cell hungry again? Exercise. That's right, exercise. And so activity. There we go. And so weight loss is very helpful. Continuous weight loss approaching ideal body weight can reduce your risk of diabetes by up to 50%, all on its own. So weight is an important part of the picture. We had a gentleman who was diabetic. He had heart failure due to having a big heart attack. He was on oxygen. He had emphysema, and his family wanted me to sit down with him and talk. I don't know if it was his idea or their idea, but wife came with the husband, and they sat down, and he was on oxygen. He couldn't walk across the room without being winded, and I'm thinking, wow, this is a tough one. He'll have to really work hard at this. And so I laid him out a program for his lungs, for his congestive heart failure, for his diabetes, for his high blood pressure. But he decided he's going to do it. He's really going to do everything I said. And he started doing, especially we had him doing lots of exercise. But he couldn't walk across the room. Well, within 2 months, he was walking 1.5 miles. He was getting off his oxygen. He was seeing the doctor because his blood sugars were going too low. Last time I saw a picture of him, he was on the front of the conference health camp advertisement as one of their healthy people. And so you can beat diabetes naturally. It can be done, and with good diet and lifestyle. Let's get back to talking about fat, though, a little bit more, because not all fats are created equal, and not all foods have the same kind of fats. If you're eating lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, like we talked about this morning from Coldwell Estelstein's diet, then you don't get a lot of fat, maybe 17% of calories coming from fat, and your risk of diabetes doesn't go up. But if you're getting lots of your calories from fat, like an average American junk food diet, then your risk of diabetes goes up by 40%. If you're getting a lot of your fats mostly from animals, as in saturated fat, then your risk of diabetes goes up by 64%. Now, there are good fats from good sources. Yes, question, thanks. What about virgin olive oils? It doesn't matter what kind of fat it is, as long as you don't eat too much of it. Well, I shouldn't say that. You certainly don't want saturated fat. But olive oil is a good choice. You just don't want to overdo it. Yeah, we use olive oil to keep things from sticking to pans and waffle irons and so forth. And so olive oil is a good choice in that regard. The good choices, though, better than getting bottled oils, is getting foods that have the oils in them naturally. So eating nuts actually lowers the risk of diabetes, especially the raw nuts or nuts that aren't deep fat fried and salted. And so nuts will definitely help you because they have the enzymes with the oils, and they have the fiber with the oils, and they have the antioxidants with the oils. I spent a little time with the Weimar Reversing Diabetes program. We had a gentleman came who was 6'6" and weighed 350 pounds. And he was riding around in a pickup truck being the foreman on a construction project. Well, after he came to the Reversing Diabetes program, he decided to park the pickup and just walk around. One of the things that was particularly interesting about his situation was that he had learned how to walk into a restaurant and to pick out good foods even though they weren't on the menu. He would look around and he would say, oh, that person's eating a steak, but it has really nice peas and carrots with it. I like peas and carrots, and over here's a, big tuna salad, but there's a lot of good lettuce and tomatoes with it. I want the lettuce and tomatoes, and he'd just tell the chef, I want that and that and that, and they'd go get it for him. I guess if you're 6'6" and weigh 300 pounds, you get what you want. But, he paid for it, but anyway, but within 1 week of starting the program, he was off all insulin, whereas before that, he was on 100 units a day. Some people have dramatic turnarounds in a short amount of time. Oh, news item. How are we going to tell the people we found the weapons of mass destruction? Remember Desert Storm and looking all through the desert? There they are. More people have died from eating cheeseburgers and fries than any war. Really, this is the bomb. This is the war right here. And is it true? Is this just a cartoon? Well, in the studies, if you eat out at fast food restaurants twice a week, not twice a day, twice a week, your risk of diabetes doubles. Doubles. And why is that? Well, here's some breakdown of some of the products they use. For example, hamburgers, a quarter-pounder hamburger will increase your risk of diabetes by 20%. But if you go with a hot dog, which is processed meat, or salami, or bologna, or that kind of thing, just 2 ounces a day will increase your risk of diabetes by 50%. So we're looking at the meat problem, the meat connection. On the other hand, if you use protein from beans, then your risk of diabetes goes down because it's got fiber, because it's got good protein. Protein isn't all created equal. The protein in beans is not the same protein as in beef. It's a different set of amino acids. And so if you switch, for example, from cow's milk to soy milk, your risk of diabetes goes down, your kidney function picks up, your insulin sensitivity picks up, and your blood pressure comes down as well. So here's the thing. Here's a guy with a hose, right? Lots of pressure. The water's squirting out. Do you think if that nozzle wasn't on that hose, you could put that nozzle on the hose if the hose was running? No. It's hard to stop diabetes if it's still running, if you're still feeding it. In order to stop the diabetes, metformin and insulin are not going to fix it. You're just trying to put a nozzle on a hose that's running. What you need to do is turn off the hose. Stop eating at the junk food restaurants. Stop eating the fats. And sugars. So we've talked about fats. Let's talk about sugars now. And let's use scientific terms. The scientific term that I find pretty useful is the glycemic index. Index means comparison. Glycemic means sugar. The way it works is like this. Everything's compared to sugar. Sugar is automatically giving a glycemic index of 100, meaning that sugar will make your blood sugar go up 100% as high and as fast as pure sugar. That's just the standard. Well, how do I compare? Well, for example, cornflakes and milk. Popular American breakfast cereal, breakfast period, has a glycemic index of 93, meaning it makes your blood sugar go up 93% as high and as fast as pure sugar. On the other hand, broccoli has a glycemic index of 20, meaning that broccoli only makes your blood sugar go up 20% as high and as fast as pure sugar. So what a glycemic index does is it tells you what a certain food is going to do to your blood sugar. And it's pretty predictable across most people. Some people have a little variation. You can go to the internet and pull down large spreadsheets of all the different foods and what their glycemic index is. What happens is when they feed high glycemic index foods to laboratory animals like rats, they developed obesity in a very short amount of time. When they feed it to people, they get hungry faster, they're less satisfied, and they eat a larger volume of food. Does that sound like the prescription for an addiction? It is, yes, the prescription for an addiction. Now, glycemic index tells you about how fast the sugar goes up, but there's another factor, and that is how much of that food you eat. Did you eat a little bit or a lot? And that takes into account something we call glycemic load. So here's the glycemic load. High glycemic load foods, for example, white rice and white bread and white potatoes and white pasta and pastries and cookies and sodas and burger and fries. But wait a minute, isn't that a protein lunch? Well, you got white bread there and white potatoes that have lost their skins, and here's a hot dog. And then there's corn chips. Aren't corn chips whole grain? Well, it has to do with the way they process them. I had a patient that worked in a corn chip factory and got hurt, and he brought me a video of him doing his job, and he took big sacks of cornmeal and put them in big cookers and then turned on the cooker for more than a day, 28 hours. What happens if you cook your broccoli too long? Well, so here's the thing. When you cook that corn, the longer you cook it, the more it breaks down the starch into sugar, the higher the glycemic index goes. And so those corn chips, even though they're salted and oiled, they're also very high glycemic index. And you end up with a big glycemic load if you eat those. Now, on the other hand, we have the low glycemic load foods, tofu and olives and greens and avocados and sprouts and nuts and whole vegetables and peas and beans and brown rice and brown bread instead of the white bread and whole grain cereal like oatmeal instead of refined things like corn flakes and milk, and apples and fresh fruit. Oh no! My doctor told me when I got to be diabetic I couldn't eat any fresh fruit. I have to have only 1/2 serving per day, and that's it. And if I eat more than that, I'm in trouble. Well, I'm not suggesting the diabetic become a fruitarian, but there's a lot of good nutrients in fruit. You need to avoid cancer, which diabetics are at higher risk of anyway. And so I've had diabetics who were diabetic for 20 years, and I said, okay, I want you to eat 80% fresh fruit for breakfast, choosing initially low glycemic fruits and working your way up over time. They said, oh no, I can't do that. I said, for 2 weeks, your blood sugars will go crazy, and then they'll straighten out as you get caught up on your nutrition. They said, oh, I don't know. I said, try it. They emailed me every day, oh, my blood sugars are terrible, blah, blah. At 2 weeks, they're like, my blood sugars are normal now. What's going on? My blood sugars are good. And then I saw them at a conference. I says, how are you doing? They says, my blood sugars have never been lower in the mornings, and here I'm eating 80% fresh fruit for breakfast. And it has to do with malnutrition more than anything. So, but I'm not suggesting fruit juices or fruit that's dried necessarily for the diabetic or canned fruit. It's fresh fruit. And what What happens if I drink the juice, though? Well, let's just compare drinking juice, which is a refined product, to eating an orange. And the blood sugar's up the side and the time across the bottom. If I drink the juice, the blood sugar tends to go up really high, really fast. Not only does it go up really high, really fast, but it doesn't stay up there very long. It comes crashing down into the basement. When it comes crashing down into the basement, the patient gets all faint and, oh man, I don't feel good. I must be low on blood sugar. Could somebody go to the refrigerator and get me another orange juice? And that's what they do. They drink another orange juice, and up it goes, and down it goes, and up it goes. Well, what happens if I eat the orange instead? Now, the orange is not been filtered. It's got all its pulp, all its fiber. It's not been pasteurized. It's not been cooked and broken down starches into sugars. And so if I eat the orange instead of the orange juice, the blood sugar comes up much more slowly. Not only does it come up slowly, it stays up a long time. Not only does it stay up a long time, it comes down more slowly and doesn't go crashing down into the basement. This is the secret to helping the diabetic keep their blood sugars normal. Really, diabetes is just what you eat. And so we'll fix what you are by fixing what you eat. Now, you certainly don't want fructose sweetened anything. I've had diabetic educators, famous diabetic educators, tell me, I tell all my diabetics to use fructose because it doesn't make your blood sugar go up. My answer, neither does gasoline. Because when you're testing for your blood sugar, you're not testing for fructose, you're testing for glucose. Your fructose can be off the charts bad, and it's much worse to have a high blood fructose. And so you don't want fructose. People using fructose-sweetened things, or agave, or high fructose corn syrup, see a much higher incidence of diabetes from this sugar than from the table sugar, which is only half fructose. Sucrose is only half fructose. All right, so let's change our chart here for a little bit. Let's put our concentration up this side. This is like our blood sugar and glucose, and our insulin in red right there. We'll have time across the bottom. We don't want to go too low. We call it the danger zone or the hunger zone. And let's start off the day with a refined cereal breakfast. After all, aren't we refined people? Shouldn't we be eating refined food? Well, this will be our cornflakes and milk instead of our bowl of oatmeal, okay? This is our refined. So up goes the blood sugar with the refined cereal breakfast. Up goes the insulin. The insulin goes too high. It pushes the sugar down into the danger zone. Oh, I'm so faint. It's only 2 hours after breakfast. It must be break time. What's for break? Oh, coffee and donuts. Up goes the blood sugar really high. The insulin overshoots, sends the blood sugar really low. Oh no, really feeling faint, must be lunchtime. What's for lunch? Burger and fries. Again, it's high glycemic load. And this is what the diabetic does all day long. Sugar up, sugar down, insulin down. And so what do they tell the diabetics? We'll just eat 8 little tiny meals all day long, and we'll put more insulin on top. But remember what happens when you put more insulin on top? 20% more people die. Yeah, anyway. Does it work? Well, can you stop your car from going forward by putting it in reverse? Well, maybe once. It did stop the car, but yeah, you can finagle things and make things work sorta, but does it really work? Well, from our cancer lecture, compared to a 2-meal-a-day program, colon cancer risk rises 70% for 3 meals a day, 90% for 4 meals a day. What's more, each additional snack time increases the risk of colon cancer another 60%. 60% for each time. Do the math on 8 little tiny meals. Well, you better get an oncologist for your next doctor. Okay, let's get off of that. Let's start over again. We got to get this straightened out. So let's eat a whole grain, unrefined breakfast like granola, a product you can look at and say, well, there's an oat and there's an almond and there's, you can tell what it is. I mean, what's Fruit Loops? What did that start out as? Who knows? These cereals that are, formed into funny shapes, something's wrong. All right, so we're looking at a whole grain breakfast like granola. And so just like eating the orange instead of drinking the orange juice, the blood sugar comes up more slowly. Not only does it come up slowly, it stays up a long time. The insulin does not overshoot. The blood sugars don't come crashing down too far. And somewhere here we're going to have a fresh vegetable lunch. And blood sugars come up more slowly, stay up a long time, and don't go crashing down into the basement. This is the secret to helping the diabetics not to have blood sugars that are going too high and too low. Just changing to whole plant foods, eaten without being refined. People on a whole plant food diet don't get hungry between meals. What would it be like not to be tempted with snacks? All because we're eating whole plant foods. What's a whole plant food? Well, here's the whole plant food. Here's one that you wouldn't want because it's got syrup in it. Here's the whole plant food, and here, but what about if we add oil? And no, that's not good. Here's, is that a plant? No, it's not a plant food at all, is it? Well, the parsley and the lemon and the how about this? No, that's not good. That'll give you diabetes. Eggs. 1 egg a day increases your risk of diabetes by 66%. That's not great. Milk. We already mentioned milk. But there is some good stuff in there, isn't there? Pepper and kale or parsley or something. All right. How about nuts? Well, you want the raw ones rather than the deep fat fried salted ones. How about corn? Well, yes, corn on the cob. But you don't want the corn chips or the corn flakes. That's not as good. Bread, you want the brown ones, not the white ones. Pasta, you want the brown ones, not the white ones. And rice, you want brown rice, not white rice. You get the idea. And if you just replace all the refined grains in your diet with whole grains, you can lower the risk of diabetes in some studies by 70% just by that move. And there's a number of reasons for that. Whole plant foods are nutritious. Whole plant foods satisfy your appetite so you don't overeat. And it also has to do with the minerals. You see, you need chromium to get the sugar into your cells. If you don't have chromium, your blood sugars go up. If you don't have chromium, the insulin can't open those doorknobs and get the sugar in the cells. But diabetics generally have no tissue chromium left because they've been eating foods that don't have chromium but need chromium for processing, so you deplete your entire body's supply of chromium. When you're out of chromium, you're out of luck. Well, I don't like using the word luck, but yeah. And so where do I get my chromium? Well, whole wheat has 8 times as much chromium as white flour. Just start eating whole plant foods. But this is a key. This is a very big key because what we have is people who either choose whole wheat or white. If they're going to eat white bread, they got to eat 8 times as much to get the same amount of chromium. And they keep eating, and they keep eating, and their body still isn't satisfied, and their body still is hungry, and they're malnourished, and they keep eating, and they're obese, and they're overweight, and they're undernourished, and they're malnourished, and they're still hungry. That's what's happening in America. Everybody's malnourished. They're eating all this white stuff that they have to eat 8 times as much to get the same nutrients, when as if they were eating the whole plant food, the whole grain product, they would be 70% less likely to get diabetes. Another valuable fact of what's good in whole plant foods is the fiber. Fiber helps a lot of things: constipation, cholesterol, heart disease, and it helps blood sugar. You see, fiber slows the rate at which the sugar moves from the digestive system into the blood. It's like a filter. It makes the trickle system, the blood. That's why our slopes were so long and low for whole plant foods compared to refined foods on those previous charts. Fiber is the benefit. I had one lady came to me, she says, I'm pregnant, I'm having trouble with high blood sugars. They say I'm gestational or gestational diabetic. And what do? I don't want to take the insulin, I don't want to take drugs, I've looked at the information, it's not good for the baby. What do? I said, well, here's what you do. Incorporate 1/4 cup of oat bran into your diet twice a day. Okay, so she started doing that. She was a home cook, so she put it in her waffles, in her pancakes, in her bread, in her whatever she was making. Got a 1/2 cup of oat bran per day, totally controlled her blood sugars, didn't need insulin or drugs, delivered a normal baby, and it worked. You see, when you switch from white bread to oat bran bread, the glucose in the blood drops by nearly half. It's very well shown in the studies. Now there's another food that's just particularly important for diabetics that I like to mention, both for type 1 and type 2 diabetics. Oh, what's the difference between type 1 and type 2? Type 2 is what we've been talking about here, people whose lifestyles made them diabetic. Type 1 is when you get a virus or something as a child or an autoimmune reaction and you lose the cells that make insulin in your pancreas. Either way, everything we teach here helps both type of diabetics from getting the complications, even though our type 1s may not ever get back to making insulin. Although, if you save them early on, you can get them back to doing insulin and not having troubles. But the food that is very good is cabbage. Cabbage makes your insulin go farther. Cabbage makes you especially insulin sensitive. Cabbage is very high in antioxidants, it's very high in fiber, and it's got good probiotic, and so it's very good for diabetics. So next time you go to the supermarket, get a couple extra heads of cabbage and start eating cabbage. Question?
Could this be all of the cabbage family, like kale and collards and everything, or does it have to be the cabbage?
That's a good question. Cabbage is what they studied, but I would imagine the other cruciferous vegetables would have similar properties. Be worth a try. It's a lot better than eating eggs or donuts. Yeah. All right. Speaking of cabbage and thinking of cabbage as a herb, there's other herbs that are very, very good for diabetes. And this, I'll give you a list here of ones we use especially for children who are going type 1 diabetic, but it's also good for type 2 diabetes. Citrus leaves. It actually has an anti-carbohydrate metabolism effect, so it's beneficial, helps your insulin. Bladderwrack, which is able to inhibit carbohydrate metabolism also, but also stimulates insulin production and protects the pancreas from inflammation. Rosemary, you can buy it as a herb in the local supermarket. Lemon balm, inhibit carbohydrate metabolism. Astragalus reduces beta cell inflammation. Those are the cells in the pancreas that make insulin. Red ginseng stimulates beta cell insulin production. And peppermint actually has some benefits, but it's also good for flavoring and doesn't hurt your risk of diabetes. So those are a list of some we have people use. I'll send you to my website where all this is in a handout here at the end, so you'll know where to find it and be able to keep track of these interesting herbs. Okay, so another thing that's very important is what you do with your morning. Do you eat breakfast? People who eat breakfast have lower risk of diabetes. If you don't eat breakfast, you don't tend to reduce the amount of food you eat for the day. You just shift later in the day when you eat it. If you eat your food later in the day, you tend to gain more weight, have higher cholesterol, have higher risk of diabetes, higher risk of cancer. And so we want to have people eating a good breakfast. And I recommend they eat lots of fresh fruit and some good high fiber grain, whole grain product. Exercise. What did we say exercise did to the cells? Yes, made the cells hungry again. And so exercise lowers blood sugar, helps weight control, and helps with mental outlook. Getting outdoors, how much exercise do I need? At least 60 minutes a day. Oh, I don't have an exercise. In other words, limit your laying and your sitting to 23 hours a day. It helps to look at it from the other side, doesn't it? Yeah, and so when do I do it? The best times are before breakfast. Diabetics often have the dawn phenomenon, meaning their blood sugars are high in the morning. But if they exercise in the morning, it helps to control that. And immediately after meals. These are the two times that are very beneficial for diabetics. Or for people who aren't diabetics. People who are more active cut their risk of diabetes in half. If you can't find time to exercise, then you have to find time to be sick. Yeah. All right, so activity is a priority on the schedule of healthy people. Active people live longer, stay independent longer, enjoy more free time with their friends and family, avoid more chronic illnesses. So what time do you have on your schedule for exercising? My wife and I like to do just like we said here. We'll get up in the morning and take a walk, and then walk after our meals. Stress. Does stress affect your risk of diabetes? Absolutely. How does it work? Well, when you get stressed, your cortisol goes up. Cortisol makes your blood sugars go up. And so you end up with more and more high blood sugars. People with high stress personalities have more diabetes. Now, I did speak about breakfast on your schedule. And I just want to talk about schedule for a minute, because in the last 5 years, there's been a lot more research coming out on chrononutrition. And you hear buzzwords like intermittent fasting and that kind of thing. But they're still behind us, what we know from the Spirit Prophecy on this topic, where she says it's better to have your meals 5 minutes early than 5 minutes late. And if you're exactly on time with your meals, then here's what happens. The body can work on a clock. You know your body runs on a clock? Soybeans run on a clock. Bunch of scientists went out to a field of soybeans with a very high-intensity light. They shined the light on the soybeans, and the soybeans turned up their leaves like as if it was the sun. Then every day for the next week, the scientists came out at that early morning hour of 3 a.m. when they had done this. And every morning at 3 a.m., the soybeans turned their leaves up, even though there was no bright light, for a whole week. It's because soybeans run on a clock. We run on clocks. And if you eat at the exact same time every day, if you go to bed at the exact same time every day, get up at the exact same time every day, you set your clock. When you set your clock, then the body will be ready with insulin before the blood sugar hits, with blood to the stomach and digestive enzymes before the food ever hits, because it can depend on the food coming down at the exact same time every day. And so when you do this, it makes a huge difference. It makes a difference for whole body inflammation, for arthritis and autoimmune disease. It makes a difference for cancer. It makes a difference for things like diabetes. Now, remember we said diabetics have peripheral neuropathy, pain or numbness in the hands or feet. If you drink more water, it will lower your blood sugar, and it will also help reverse peripheral neuropathy. Drinking plenty of water has been one of the few things that's been shown to reverse peripheral neuropathy. I was at a hospital when I quit practicing in the hospital, where the CEO of the hospital came around and said, "We got a problem with our employees. Our employees like to go see the doctor too much." Imagine being in the business and complaining that your employees are using the business. Well, because it ups insurance utilization. And employees of the hospital are hard to insure because they know what tests are available and they want them all. So they're expensive to cover. So he came to the wellness department and he says, what do I do? And the wellness nurse said, I have an idea. Why don't you put free bottled water in all the break rooms so that the employees will have easy access to good water? Okay, let's do it. And so they put free bottled water in all the break rooms. They would put a whole pallet with all these cases of water on it. And so at break times, we would go and grab a free bottle of water. Instead of the employees going down to the cafeteria and getting coffee or out to the soda machine by the ER, they would just drink a bottle of water. It cost the hospital $25,000 that year to keep bottled water in all the break rooms. But at the end of the year, when they calculated what they had saved on insurance utilization, the employees had decreased the out-of-pocket by $240,000. That meant less time at the doctor. That meant more time doing things with family and friends. What would happen if you drank more water? Water, the water of life, right? Well, what have we been talking about? Aren't we talking about the Bible diet? Genesis 1:29 and 3:18, fruits, grains, nuts, seeds, vegetables, the original diet, the diet of Eden, the Bible diet. But remember when God let the Israelites leave Egypt, he said, if you'll diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord your God, if they would stick with that original diet, they could totally avoid diabetes. In summary, take advantage of everything God put in whole plant foods for you. Eat an unrefined whole plant food diet, high in nutrients, minerals, phytochemicals, fiber, and vitamins. Drink 3 quarts or liters of water a day. 1 when you get up, and 1 between breakfast and lunch, and 1 between lunch and lunch and going to bed. Exercise before breakfast and after meals. Lean toward your ideal body weight. Well, do you understand now why I titled it Diabetes, the butter with a sweet? It tends to be the fat that gives you diabetes because of the effect on filling the cells up so fast. But it's the sugar that gives you all the complications. I mean, the sugar will give you diabetes too over time. It'll make you fat too, but it's the combination of the two that's especially prone to give you diabetes. Make sense? So if you go to my website, which is northernlightshealtheducation.com, and you click on presentation handouts, you can download the handout for this lecture. Or if you just scroll down here, you'll see a picture of our book that has a cover that looks sort of like that. And you can download the PDF, the whole thing, for free, where we have it there. So, any questions? Any more questions? Time? Mm-hmm.
Different tables of the glycemic index sometimes have a little bit of difference in the foods. But is it that important to watch that if you're eating fruits? You need to pay attention as to whether you eat lower index, higher.
Good question. Thank you. Is it important to follow glycemic index even in eating fruits? Here's the thing. Once you start getting a very nutritious diet and following all the recommendations here and get over your diabetes, then you can just ignore the glycemic index. The glycemic index, if you stick with the glycemic index, you start drawing some unhealthy conclusions, such as, maybe I should just be eating low carbohydrate. That's not the right answer. So I say, just go by eating lots of whole plant foods and getting your exercise and drinking your water and sticking with a schedule and see your diabetes go away, and then just continue to follow the Eden diet.
And the other question is on the exercise. Say, if you do a lot of housework or cleaning, et cetera, can that be included as your exercise time, or does it have to be out walking?
If you're very active in your exercise, then any exercise is good, including gardening or whatever. If your exercise doesn't really get your heart going much, or then it's probably practical to still take a short walk, maybe a 10-minute walk in the morning and after meals. There's a lot of benefit. We're told that it's hard to find a better exercise than walking. And there's a lot of benefits to it. Just the action gets all your organs going, Ellen White says, and keeps your bowels from shrinking. And she has a lot of interesting things to say about it. There's a lot of benefits to it as far as getting away from the stressful work of cleaning the house. Just being out in nature and away. So there's a lot of benefits to it that may not be entirely equaled by all the exercise you might do in work. Question?
Yeah, about 30 years ago, I was listening to the radio, and they had a kind of an expose about how they make margarine and everything. So when I got home, I told my wife, I said, that stuff is terrible. No more margarine for me, you know. So just want butter, so I was eating butter for about 30 years. And then I changed to plant butter. Is that really the best, that plant butter?
Boy, what is plant butter? Oh, well, what I would consider good, healthy butter would be like almond butter. Most of the processed butters are just, pure fat. And, somebody was asking about olive oil. I saw a very interesting YouTube on olive oils by a famous nutritionist. He says, okay, let's compare olive oil to Twinkies. Which one has more fat per serving? Olive oil. Which one has more vitamin C? Twinkies. Which one has... And the Twinkies ended up being healthier than the olive oil because olive oil was just pure fat. And so here's the thing. The less refined food you eat, the better. I know we need a little fat to do, keep things from sticking to pans, and the priest used a little fat with their offerings, and Elijah had a little fat with his meal for his bread, with his widow of Zarephath. But they didn't have available to them the large quantities of oil that we have today. Today we have oil of everything. You go to the supermarket and there's a whole shelf full. We overdo it on refined things. So you're much better off eating the whole plant foods. So almond butter, sunflower seed butter. You can find different butters. The ones that are questionable, peanut butter and cashew butter, kind of make your cholesterol go up. But they're still better than, margarine or butter, cow butter. Did you have another question?
Yeah, I heard on the news that there's really not enough olive oil in the world. Everywhere you go, even small towns, there's olive oil. So there's a lot of counterfeit olive oil where they add other oils. So what olive oil do you think is the best?
There's whole books written on the whole scam of olive oil with good evidence. And olive oil has become a legal term. Oh, you know what the legal people are like. 100% virgin olive oil is not a technical definition or a laboratory analysis. It is a legal definition. And in that legal definition, you can have a high percentage of canola oil or whatever garbage oil. So where you find pure olive oil, I don't know. It's definitely a challenge. I guess if you know a grower. Yes. What about coconut oil? Coconut oil is a tropical oil that's got more saturated fat than lard. And the effect on your inflammation in your body is about the same as lard. It increases the inflammation in your body. People like to use it because it doesn't oxidize, because it has no double bonds in it. It's not. It's totally saturated, but it's already got its problems. The problems it has is different than the saturated oil's problems. So you're better off using it on your skin or to make lotions, or. But eating it, it definitely decreases. We talked this morning about the oxygen in your brain going down. Coconut oil definitely does that. So coconut oil, I'll just give you my experience with coconut oil. I was in the tropics, and my aunt was a missionary nurse to Guam. So I was on Guam, and she married a Guamanian, a very nice gentleman who had become an Adventist. And one day he says, "Hey, John, let's go make coconut oil." And I says, "Okay, what's that involved?" And so we jumped in the Jeep, and we went around the island, and he would go running up a coconut tree, literally, and kick off some coconuts. I'd go pick them up and put them in the back of the Jeep. We did this for several days till we had the front yard, which would be about a third the size of this room, full of coconuts. You know, they're big. You know, they got a husk on them. Then we spent the next week taking the husks off with a pickaxe. Then we took a machete and broke them all open and ground out the meat. And then we put some water on them in a big stock pot, warmed it up, and all the oil came to the top. And we put the oil into a jar. Out of all those coconuts, we got 1 quart jar of oil. It was a yellow, not real light yellow, sort of an amber yellow color. It was in the house. We had the house air conditioned to about 75 degrees. It never turned thick. It never turned hard. It never turned white. It never turned to a block. And they used it in cooking, and then all that other coconut pulp we made into coconut candy. But anyway, I was thinking, oh, that's interesting. This stuff's liquid. Later on in life, I ended up in the Philippines working, and they were using coconut oil in their Jeeps for diesel engines to run them. Well, anybody that's been in America knows you can't use anything in a diesel engine that's going to turn solid. So their homemade coconut oil stayed liquid all the time. Well, then I came back to the United States, and my dad, who used to live over here at Flippin, was making a greenhouse, and it was going to be passive solar heated, and we got a whole bunch of barrels from the local corn chip factory. And my job got to be to clean them out. And they had coconut oil in them. And I'm looking at the lid, and it said it had 8 ingredients. It had tocopherols and BHA and BHD. It had been hydrogenated, and it was this white, solid sludge stuff that they sell for coconut oil all over the place at all these, health food shops. And I'm cleaning it out, and I'm going, yuck, this is thick, and it was quite a job. Anyway, so I called my aunt on Guam. I says, I'm confused. I just cleaned out a bunch of barrels of thick, white coconut oil, and it's the same type of stuff they're selling over here as extra virgin, cold-pressed, cold-processed, whatever, coconut oil. And yet it's this white sludge. I said, did we ever have that coconut oil we made there on Guam turn solid, turn white, turn into blocks? She says, no. I said, and so I had that discussion with her, and then I said, well, they're selling this white block stuff over here. She says, your cousin runs the ABC over here, and they're selling that white block stuff here. And I'm thinking, that's not coconut oil. It's probably just like olive oil. 100% cold-pressed, cold-processed coconut oil is probably a legal designation for blocks of Crisco that were made out of coconut oil. So I think it's a scam. I think coconut oil, probably if you did it yourself like we did in Guam, is probably a lot better for you. I know for me personally, if I even just put it on a waffle iron and cook a waffle, I can tell how I feel different the rest of the day. My brain isn't working as well. I think the stuff, the joke that it cures Alzheimer's, it doesn't cure Alzheimer's. The studies haven't shown that.
So when you bake something like bread or what, and you want to put a little oil, and what do you put in there? We use flaxseed oil.
Well, you're getting into some very fine details. I'll tell you, when you bake bread that is flat bread, like maybe Elijah would have made out of the oil and barrel, then you're fine. The oil doesn't tend to deteriorate so bad. But if you make yeast-raised bread and you add oil to the bread, and then you cook it, and it's in the actual mix of the bread, it ups the free radicals and the oxidized lipids in the bread by 10 times. It makes your bread that much worse for you. It's a big hit to put oil in. I don't know, something about the yeast, fermenting and so forth, and increasing the problem.
You make non-yeast, like biscuits, just like
Then good olive oil would be the choice. Good olive oil. A lot of the seed oils are extracted with heat and with chemicals. And when you extract oil with heat and chemicals, it makes other byproducts, other toxic chemicals. Let's see, what's the name of the doctor with the Humane Society? Anyway, there's a famous doctor out there that's always on YouTube, and he did a whole thing on oils and what happens when you make oils and all these chemicals that are made from when they make seed oils. And you're much better off with olive oil that's cold pressed, cold processed, if that's the way they really did it.
yeah, but if it's legal label, you don't know what you got.
Yeah. So what you do in baked goods is you can use whole flax seeds or nut butters or things like that. Or if you want, you can replace it with things that just keep things moist. So you can put in carrots or zucchini shredded or applesauce. That'll keep it moist instead of having to put oil in. And don't use oil. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yes.
Okay, I'm thinking ahead. Do you or Julie teach a class on baking bread?
No, we don't. We tend to make flatbreads. We make a cornbread that's not got a raising agent. Oh, we've been experimenting with communion bread since there's a lot of recipes around for it. We made, what was it we made this morning? Oat, date, walnut crackers. That was good.
That may be a thought, just for
Or flatbreads, yeah.
be interesting, because everybody likes bread
Yeah, right.
and crackers.
Crackers, yeah.
And some communion bread is very good, and I've had some communion bread that was
Unchewable. Hardtack. Right. Yes.
Also, I noticed, and I may have been reading more into this than what you were meaning, but it hit me, when you were talking about the time of day to exercise in the morning, or to eat what's in the morning, and so on. I got to thinking, the Lord wants us to seek ye first the kingdom of God in the morning, so we want to get up early to pray. So you get up early enough, an hour or two early, pray, whatever it is, and then you get up another half hour to an hour to exercise before you do breakfast, and then you do breakfast, and then you eat your, look, after, I'm gonna say it's gonna be, most of the time, we eat about 9:30 breakfast. That's not really an early morning breakfast, because by the time we get up and do the Bible study and do anything else, it's 9 o'clock.
Right. How early you do breakfast, yeah, is sort of dependent upon the rest of your schedule. But
But we only eat twice a day, at 9, and then usually about 4 in the afternoon.
yeah, that's fine. So, yeah, the principles are 5 hours between meals, at least 3 hours between your last meal and going to bed. But best thing is 2 meals. Ellen White says she ate at 7 and 1. She talks about Israel only ate 2 meals a day up until the time of Solomon, the biggest meal, or the last meal coming near the middle of the day.
Now, Sabbath messes up our schedule, because we're used to eating breakfast at 9 and then dinner around 3 or 4.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we've had that experience too. It's hard to schedule the rest of your week around what happens on Sabbath.
But God will wake you up when you're ready to study.
There you go. Yeah, and you don't have to exercise for a long time in the morning, just 10, 15 minutes. I mean, we do 20 minutes. We do 20 minutes in the morning and then 20 minutes after each of our 2 meals. Any other questions?
So for the diabetic, 2 meals a day is okay?
Oh, yes, yeah. And especially if they're eating the whole plant foods, it sticks with them longer. It keeps going, trickling in slower. They don't end up with hypoglycemia. And your body also is trainable. You know, Ellen White says you can teach your body to eat 8 meals a day. She says 8 meals and miss one if you didn't eat it. She says that's no sign that you're doing the right thing or that you really missed it. It's a matter of training. And so you pick your new schedule, and then you either wean yourself toward it or go cold turkey or whatever. You choose a new schedule, and then once it gets set in place, then your body will get used to it. Habits take, 3-6 weeks to get established, but once you're on the new schedule and you're sticking very closely with it, and I've had people tell me, right now I'm working with a lady, and she says, yeah, I've been sticking with the schedule, and she flies, through time zones a lot, and she says, now I don't have jet lag near as bad because my schedule is very fixed, and my body's clocks are all working well, and when I change, I stick with a new schedule, and it works. I've had people who had back pain. They tried everything else that nothing would work, and then when they got on a good, strict schedule with their eating times, all of a sudden the back pain straightened out along with everything else. So there's a lot to this, what they call chronobiology, circadian rhythms, chrononutrition. And Ellen White had a lot to say about regularity in meal times, regularity in sleep times. She says, we're not animals. We don't just eat any old time. We pick a time and stick with it. And there's benefits to it. It's just healthy. And especially for diabetics whose blood sugars go crazy. And your teeth, too. Did you know your teeth run in cycles? I had a classmate in college who had never brushed his teeth and never had a cavity. He got married to a girl who brushed her teeth all the time and had cavities. What was her difference? Well, his family had learned when he was growing up that the way to keep your teeth good was to have a very strict eating schedule. Your teeth go through cleaning cycles. If you're eating all the time or at all times, they never go through a cleaning cycle. But if you're eating the exact same time every day, then the teeth do their eating, and then they go through the cleansing cycle. And so his wife, though she brushed her teeth, was on an irregular schedule all the time growing up, and so she had cavities. And yet he'd never brushed his teeth. So that's very interesting. All right, well, you've been a good group. Let's see. Why don't we close with a word of prayer, and then you can have the rest of the Sabbath at home. All right, let's bow our heads. Dear Father in heaven, we're thankful for your blessing of the time we could spend together here today. Lord, we pray that we'll all understand your health message better and be better prepared to share it with others, that we'll understand how to keep ourselves healthy so that we can avoid some of the illnesses coming on this earth with the threat of more pandemics and also the pandemics we have of lifestyle diseases, of cancer and diabetes and high blood pressure and thyroid issues. Lord, we pray for your blessing on each person here, that your Holy Spirit will go home with them and that they'll meet again next week to honor and praise you. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.